Located in the northern plains of the United States, east of the Rockies, along the South Dakota-Wyoming border, is a small mountain range, the Black Hills, rich in cultural and political history and natural beauty. To the Lakota Sioux, the Black Hills were Pahasapa, considered the origin of their people and the center of the universe. On Bear Butte, the Cheyenne were handed their sacred arrows, and Indians still come to pray. Less than 20 miles west, a mile high, gold prospectors located one of the richest deposits of gold on Earth, the Homestake Claim, the largest producer of gold in the Western Hemisphere. Colonel George Custer led the first major expedition of whites into the Black Hills in 1874, confirming rumors of gold in the unexplored Indian Territory. A stampede of gold seekers followed. Deadwood soon became the metropolis of the hills, as thousands from all over the country hastily set up mining operations in Deadwood Gulch. A large outcrop of gold ore was discovered in what would become the city of Lead, and the Homestake Claim was filed in April of 1876. George Hearst and other California investors supplied the capital necessary to mine and mill the rich ore. Gold panners found security rather than wealth in a mine that would outlive them all. The Gold Rush Camp became a mining and milling center, which it has remained in modern times. Tourists, lured to the Black Hills by their natural beauty and Old West character, provide a source of income for many local residents. But the Homestake Mine has been the lifeblood of the economy in the northern hills for well over 100 years. Indeed, 12 years longer than South Dakota has been a state. Homestake today is the oldest continuously worked mine in the free world. But prosperity and employment from the mine also had a price. For each ton of ore mined and processed, less than 1/5 of an ounce of gold has normally been obtained. So every ton of ore mined produced nearly a ton of waste, called tailings, a finely ground, powdery sand containing arsenic and other heavy metals such as zinc, chromium, and copper, natural to the gold-bearing rock like the gold itself. Added to the tailings from the gold recovery process were toxic chemicals, mercury and cyanide, 133 pounds of cyanide daily, according to a 1960 study, and 12 to 40 pounds of mercury daily. Homestake disposed of this waste, as had miners in the Black Hills from the time of the gold rush. Tailings were dumped into a convenient stream. Although much of the waste sand was returned underground, 3,000 tons per day were discharged directly into Gold Run Creek. The discharge in June 1971, according to the EPA, totaled 312 pounds of cyanide, 240 pounds of zinc, 72 pounds of copper, and over 2,700 tons of other solids, including arsenic iron sulfide, daily. From Homestake Mine, Gold Run Creek, Battleship Gray, flowed 1/2 miles down its course underneath a highway between Lead and Deadwood and into Whitewood Creek. Clear until it met Gold Run, Whitewood there assumed the same gray texture. Raw sewage joined the pollution of Whitewood Creek at many points. Neither town felt the need to treat sewage, which would disappear anyway in mine tailings already polluting the stream. A boomtown labyrinth of sewers and drainage pipes emptied raw sewage into Whitewood Creek. Residents ignored the pollution as best they could.
I guess I've been conditioned not to look at the creek or really think about it. Somewhere along, probably in my childhood, I learned that this creek was just a necessary evil and that it had to be here and there wasn't too much to do about it. So I try not to think about it or even look at it.
The good Lord will clean it all out when he gets ready.
You ever see any fish in the stream?
No, never has been that I know of. My father's been here since '76.
Although all other waters in South Dakota were Class A and could not be legally polluted, In 1935, the state classified Whitewood Creek as Class B water, suitable for carrying waste. A 1960 study by the South Dakota Department of Health, however, found that the Belle Fourche River, a Class A stream, was also polluted as Whitewood Creek flowed into the Belle Fourche. 20 miles of the Belle Fourche were devoid of aquatic life. University of South Dakota filmmaker Richard Fry dramatically documented the pollution in 1969 in his aptly titled film, River's End, for the State Department of Game, Fish, and Parks. That department's study in 1965 had documented pollution 110 miles, from Gold Run Creek, through Whitewood Creek, through the Belle Fourche River, into the Cheyenne River. Although the pollution was not as readily visible, it was soon measured all the way to the Missouri. The state and federal environmental agencies captured and analyzed fish from the Oahe Reservoir throughout the 70s.
And we have about 11 ounces.
Sample fish were weighed, measured, logged, and filleted.
2.5 pounds.
Edible portions of the flesh were tagged and frozen for shipment to the South Dakota State Health Lab in Pierre.
Yeah.
The laboratory analysis employed vigorous chemical digestion. Traces of mercury, reduced to elemental mercury vapor, were measured. Though the stringency of the FDA guideline of 0.5 parts per million was controversial, the initial surveys found mercury in amounts above federal guidelines in the flesh of fish from the Cheyenne arm of the Oahe Reservoir. The trail of contaminated water extended halfway across the state of South Dakota. In June 1973, the state posted signs warning fishermen of the potential danger. But there was another concern as well. The South Dakota Geological Survey detected arsenic in wells in the floodplains of the Whitewood, Belle Fourche, and Cheyenne streams, where tailings had been deposited over the years. Contamination by the effluents from lead and deadwood was a growing concern. To the State Department of Environmental Protection, the cleanup of Whitewood Creek was a priority.
Whenever our department tries to solve another pollution problem in the state, we're always questioned about what we're doing at Lead Deadwood Homestake. So I think it's a question of our credibility with the citizens of the state when they realize that the severe pollution problem is existing in the Lead Deadwood area. It is the most serious water pollution problem in South Dakota. It is definitely impairing beneficial uses downstream of the discharges.
In a semi-arid climate in which these streams were life-giving arteries, used for irrigation, for livestock, as well as for sport fishing, the tailings and waste so long tolerated had become a problem. When the extent of the mercury pollution became known, Homestake Mining Company altered its refining process to eliminate the use of mercury for gold amalgamation. In fact, since the mid-60s, Homestake commissioned numerous studies of tailings disposal. The EPA, the state, and a newly formed sanitary district endorsed a plan for a 290-acre impoundment and wastewater plant 8 miles downstream in Centennial Valley. Centennial Valley was one of the most productive agricultural areas in the Black Hills, with ranching operations as old as Homestake. A Save Centennial Valley Association was organized to voice concerns about potential harm to the area groundwater and to protect traditional uses of the valley.
Water supplies in Whitewood come right out of that Centennial Valley area. The Centennial Valley area is the recharge area.
The state soon abandoned the Centennial Valley concept and directed the sanitary district and Homestake to separately treat their wastes in their own backyards. Homestake soon began construction of a tailings impoundment 1.5 miles from the mine in the steeply sloped Grizzly Gulch. A dam 230 feet high, more than 1/4 mile wide, impounded nearly 160 acres. Pumps would slurry tailings through a pipeline to the dam, and return the water decanted from the impoundment back to the mine for reuse or wastewater disposal. The voters of Lead and Deadwood, meanwhile, approved the construction of a sewage treatment system. The sanitary district commissioned the design of a wastewater plant to be built just below Deadwood by the Days of 76 rodeo grounds.
The sewage treatment plant will be somewhat unique for South Dakota in that it will be a completely enclosed facility. Total cost is about $5.8 million, 75% of which is funded by EPA.
Citizens were optimistic.
The U.S. kids will have something to do around it and play around it and inner tube and stuff.
I feel pretty good about the project. That is, there are, all kinds of criticisms that can be made of it, but if you take 3,000 tons of silt a day and all of the raw sewage of 2 towns out of the creek, you can't help but benefit it.
After nearly 20 years of study and concern and an expenditure by Homestake of over $15 million, impoundment of mine tailings was soon a reality. In December 1977, Homestake pumped and discharged tailings for the first time ever, not into Gold Run Creek, but into the Grizzly Gulch impoundment. Heavy snowfalls in the winter of '78 obscured for a while what would be apparent by summer and fall. Above normal snowmelt helped clear out the stream faster than many thought possible. Analysis of the stream by the Department of Environmental Protection established a statistical basis from which the state could monitor the effects of tailings treatment. But you didn't have to be a scientist to see what was obvious.
In comparing the discharge of Homestake's effluent into Gold Run Creek in 1978 versus 1977, Homestake has reduced its discharge by 99.98%, with the exception of a few minor heavy metals, a chemical compound cyanide, and a few suspended solids. The pollutant load has been decreased by 99.98%, and Homestake is pleased with that result.
Before and after comparisons were dramatic.
The creek is beginning to clean up considerably. You can see the bottom of the creek bed, the rocks.
Dr. Alan Lochner was head of what was then the South Dakota Department of Environmental Protection.
You can also see evidence that algae is beginning to grow in the creek, which was impossible before Homestake removed its discharge. And there are evidences within the area, particularly within Deadwood, that other forms of aquatic plant life are beginning to appear, all of which are essential to the food chain for fish life survival. We continue to be optimistic. The creek can be rehabilitated.
But not everyone was so impressed.
There's not the sand going down through here, but there's the open, rotten sewerage coming right along. Instead of having the sand in there to color it, you've got the straight flushings right here. You can tell by the color of the creek. We're following the tracks of Russia right now. Too much government dabbling in where there's nothing to be really benefited.
For the first time in a century, the discharge of raw sewage was visible in Whitewood Creek.
So we all look to be stunk out of Deadwood because this open sewerage coming in.
Completion of the sewage treatment plant in Deadwood would solve the problem, and construction was well underway in the fall of '78. There remained, however, another problem not so easily solved. Wastewater entering Gold Run Creek from Homestake still contained toxic levels of cyanide and heavy metals.
These matters are very complex. The nature of the pollution problem to Whitewood Creek, the volume of the waste, present some very, very complex technical as well as legal problems. Homestake Mining Company was, by April 1 of this year, 1978, unable to meet discharge limitations for cyanide, zinc, and copper. This and related matters has led to considerable litigation.
Homestake began construction of additional treatment facilities. Wastewater would be percolated through a sand filter system. Experimental pilot plants for the destruction of complex cyanides were also built. Though its exterior was unfinished in the spring of '79, the sanitary district's sewage treatment plant was operational, and sewer lines brought wastewater to the new plant for treatment. Waste sludge came out of the plant's centrifuge, ready for useful disposition as a fertilizer on pasture land. After treatment for ammonia and filtering, processed water flowed from the plant past what would be a future holding pond to Whitewood Creek, its quality well within state and federal guidelines. By 1980, Homestake had successfully refined its sand filtration system for removal of suspended solids. But complex cyanides remained a problem. In fact, Homestake was looking where none had looked before. There was no known technology for cyanide destruction. A federal court fined Homestake $40,000, and the company agreed to pay the state an additional $350,000 for stream rehabilitation.
We have to submit the EPA.
Environmental protection was now a part of Governor William Janklow's new Department of Water and Natural Resources. Bob Neufeld was secretary.
A consent decree has been signed by Judge Bogue in Rapid City. This involves a time schedule for continued research by Homestake on the treatment of its effluent.
Homestake built a new chemical laboratory, initiated research, and finally identified, after 18 months' work, analytical methods that would aid in development of a treatment process.
The numbers that were established in the permit levels were so low that we had basically no way to detect these limits. So a great deal of our research in this laboratory is designed toward perfecting our tests so that we can read these very low trace levels.
Could fish live in the effluent produced by the treatment? This was the ultimate question. Bioassays were initiated in January of 1980. As Homestake's research continued, Whitewood Creek showed further improvement, despite the higher-than-allowed levels of cyanide and heavy metals. Analysis of the stream in September 1980 revealed a variety of life. Midge larvae and aquatic worms, which adapt to lower water quality, predominated. Yet a small number of caddis flies and stoneflies, organisms indicative of clean water habitat, were also found in the stream.
As you look in the stream at this point, you can see insect life swimming around. And also, if you will watch real closely, there is insect life on the rocks also. So the stream is coming back to life.
The community's attitude toward the creek was also improving.
It's been 3 years since it started, and it's like a different creek. Real estate value on property along the creek, it's just more valuable. And I would think down the creek, it's got to make a difference.
Because the consent decree provided for the payment of $350,000 to the state of South Dakota for the rehabilitation of Whitewood Creek, we've been considering nominating it as part of the state system of scenic and recreational streams. Because of its prior condition, it remains largely undeveloped. We would like to see some sort of a plan developed with local residents for maintaining the stream in its essentially primitive character.
You know, we're always talking about, let's take care of our environment for future generations, and certainly we should do that. But in this case, what we're looking at is that we're the children now of past generations of pollution into Whitewood Creek. And as the children of that event, we're paying the price of cleaning it up. We're also having the opportunity to leave a legacy for our children and perhaps make this unnecessary in the future. So it's a very significant achievement.
The Department of Game, Fish, and Parks was the principal developer of the plan for Whitewood Creek's habitat rehabilitation. With the technical assistance of the Soil Conservation Service, the department would stabilize banks where necessary and improve fish habitat. Another priority was the removal of junk and trash, which had accumulated in and along the creek for decades, especially at the Deadwood Municipal Dump, closed in 1981. $40,000 was allocated for major junk removal, and over 1,000 tons were hauled away to a landfill. Local volunteers walked other sections of the stream, picking up trash.
We found a lot of debris in the stream, a lot of old planks and such, a lot of litter that had been dumped from various trailer courts around the stream. Basically, the creek was in a mess. It needed a lot of work done on it. I think the Game Fish and Parks program, I think it's a very worthwhile project.
Seeking to assess Whitewood Creek's potential as a fishery, the state and Homestake each conducted biological assessments of Whitewood Creek above the mine's discharge, temporarily stunning fish with an electric charge to determine the size, weight, and number of fish in the stream.
Brook, 22. Whitewood Creek has been an established fishery above the discharge for a number of years, basically a brook trout population. I can remember personally fishing here 30 years ago as a child. As the water conditions get better downstream and the problems are taken care of, we feel that we can offer a real good fishing opportunity for the public in the future.
By 1982, Homestake obtained encouraging results for the reduction of the remaining pollutants in its effluent through a revolutionary, yet simple and cost-effective biological treatment process.
This required a tremendous amount of research and applied technology, not only through Homestake scientists, but through scientists throughout the world. This was developed here. The plant is the first of its kind in the world.
This is an attached growth bacterial treatment process.
A strain of bacteria developed by the company rotated through the wastewater on biological contactors. The organisms digested the cyanides in the wastewater, producing harmless byproducts. Heavy metals in the water stuck to the bacteria. The technological breakthrough had been made. Cleanup of Homestake's effluent was only a matter of time. The state of South Dakota granted Homestake an extension for meeting discharge standards, while a full-scale wastewater treatment plant was designed and built. In early 1983, site preparation was well underway. Though the Deadwood dump site was clear of debris, toxic residues in the soil were a potential threat to the stream during periods of high flow or runoff. To protect the bank from erosion, a concrete foundation was laid and cribbing installed, 2,500 six-foot concrete logs which were filled with boulders. Elsewhere in Deadwood, construction of a concrete retaining wall and riprapping protected other areas of the stream bank prone to erosion. Channelization of Whitewood Creek from the time of the gold rush had left few natural meanders of the stream in Deadwood. To improve the quality of the fish habitat, wing deflectors were constructed in the creek next to the rodeo grounds, where public access would be greatest. The triangular structures jut into the stream alternately from opposite banks, creating meanders in the creek without substantially altering its course. Behind the deflectors, deep pools, protected from the swift current, provide critical habitat for trout. For Whitewood Creek, 1984 was historic. Homestake's wastewater treatment plant rapidly neared completion early in the year. And by the spring, finishing touches on the stream improvement projects, including sodding and seeding, were completed. Whitewood Creek was ready for its final metamorphosis. Homestake's wastewater treatment plant, after final tests, began full-scale operation in August of 1984.
The volume of water that we treat is about 5.5 million gallons a day, or 4,000 gallons per minute. This full-scale plant consists of 48 rotating discs, each with in the neighborhood of 100,000 square feet of surface area, which gives us a tremendous volume of bacteria on the disc. The first problem was to isolate a bacteria, which we did find right here on Homestake property, which could tolerate levels of cyanide. We took these bacteria and acclimated the bacteria or got the bacteria used to higher and higher and higher levels of cyanide until they could live quite comfortably and digest quite well the levels of cyanide in the water.
The mine's effluent was discharged to Whitewood Creek for the first time ever, free of toxic levels of cyanide and metals. For Whitewood Creek, the effect was immediate. Within a month, biologists found wild brook trout, migrants from the upper reaches of the Whitewood Creek, living in the formerly polluted stream. By 1985, brown and rainbow trout, as well as brook trout, were increasing dramatically. Fish were thriving where the stream had once been deadliest. The Department of Game, Fish, and Parks added Whitewood Creek to its regular stocking program.
The stream was charcoal gray in color. It was completely devoid of life. Whitewood Creek was dead. It's a genuine tribute to the efforts of all those who've been involved with this project that this stream today is alive and that we're able to stock it with fish.
A public and private investment of over $40 million. Years of planning, construction, and research were paying off.
It was an era of Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane.
Homestake's patented treatment process received national recognition within the scientific community and attention from the media.
It was a great team effort, and we certainly are proud to be a part of.
Voracious bacteria eat waste, wrote Time magazine. Yet the true reward was in the stream itself. Fish had returned to Whitewood Creek, and by the summer of 1985, so had people. After more than 100 years, an industrial and domestic sewer was reborn. A clear mountain stream.